What is your favorite way to create sacred space? Whether you're creating it indoors or outdoors, you're creating it in a large area or a small area, or even if you're creating that sacred space in your own mind, this idea of purification and cleansing techniques can be important to our magical practices, our spell work, and our rituals. So, tonight we're going to be talking about various ways to create sacred space, from smoke cleansing to asperging, from sweeping to psychic cleansing, and everything in between. So, whether you're new to the idea of creating sacred space, or you've been doing it for a while and you're just looking for some new techniques, there is something for everyone in tonight's episode. So, merry meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. And tonight, this episode is all about techniques for creating sacred space. So, welcome to those who are joining us. Um, I see Jamie's in the chat. And anybody else who's live with us, you can say hello in the chat so we know you're here. Um, and so, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about sacred space tonight. As we go through, share with us some ideas, especially if you're live. Share the ideas that you use to create sacred space. If you've tried some of the techniques that I'm going to show tonight, let us know how they worked out for you. If there are any that you think seem interesting, let us know about that too. And any that I don't include tonight, we would love to hear about that. And that goes for you guys in replay too. You can leave your questions and comments as well. And make sure to leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in the video, and we make sure it gets out to the feed of more people that way. All right, so let us dive in. There's a lot to talk about tonight. Tonight's episode is, I have a lot of things gathered here next to me. This is going to be a big show and tell tonight. And hopefully there's some things here that you've never heard of or tried. And it may also give you a refresher and remind you of things and practices that maybe you haven't done in a while. So, but let's start with a definition of sacred space. So, really, what is it? The classical definition of sacred space is an area that is used for some kind of a spiritual or divine purpose. So, for example, a temple that has been erected to honor a deity, or a church, or a religious site of some kind is going to already be infused with the energy of the sacred because of the purpose that it was built for. What we also tend to see is that as people travel to certain places and they do rituals there, or they do spiritual work in a place, it's going to amplify the sacredness of that area. And we will be talking about that a little bit more as we go as well. And if anybody who is live here can just leave a comment that okay, I see more people here now. I just want to make sure the microphone is working. I am aware that we went into Mercury retrograde today, and that's usually when the mic decides to malfunction, but we have people here. No one said anything yet, so it looks like we're good. Saying hi to Kurt also, who's joining us, and Joanne is here, and also Tracy I can see in the chat. Okay, so merry meet everybody. So aside from those spiritual centers or sites that we would consider sacred space, we also think of nature as being very sacred, especially those of us who come from the witchcraft community, pagans. Many of us use the phrase, nature is my temple. And this reminds us that all of nature really is sacred. And so the question is, can any space be made sacred? In my opinion, all of nature is sacred to begin with. And the mundane may be infused with the sacredness through repetition and practice, or through us intentionally doing something to make it sacred. So, another definition of the word sacred is space that has been set aside for a specific purpose, which also reminds us of the definition of consecration. So, a consecration is to set something aside for a specific purpose, most of the time for a spiritual purpose, but not always. And so we may consecrate the tools that we buy by infusing them with an intention for a specific purpose that we have. So, in that same respect, any type of space can be made sacred if we choose to call it sacred. Um, that can lead into an interesting idea about nature, though, as well. Now, how would we create sacred space? I'll get back to nature in just a moment, but how would we create sacred space, or why would we create it, and when? So one time of many times that we might want to create sacred space is before a ritual. So especially if you are doing ritual in a room that is traveled through or traversed through by various people, there's mundane mixed in with the sacred. So even this space right here where I record these videos. This is also the space where I do all of the rituals for our online coven. This is where I do the rituals for our Shadow Seekers membership. This is where I teach yoga. I also do my own personal private dark moon rituals in this space as well. But this space is a kind of throughway for the house because there's a bathroom here and people travel through this room. And so there's a lot of mundane traveling that goes through this space as well. So even though, because of the multiple different rituals and sacred, um, what would be the word, sacred practices that we do here in this room, it still gets infused with that mundane when people are traveling through it. So before a ritual, I would want to do something to this space to make it sacred. And the more I do a ritual in a space, I believe that the more sacred it becomes. I have less work to do, the more I do work in that space. Now, if, for example, I was going to another space that I wasn't used to doing ritual in, I would probably do more work to purify and cleanse that space because it's a space that I'm not used to working in and it isn't already infused with my energy. Now, other times that we might want to create some sacred space besides a formal ritual would just be a magical working of any kind. I personally believe that yoga and meditation and candle gazing and all of the practices, all the spiritual practices that I like to teach in both our membership and here on Ask Aislin, I think that all of those things are magical and spiritual practices, right? And so we could set up some sacred space prior to doing that. So even before doing yoga and meditation and breath work, maybe creating some sacred space in the area where we'll be doing that work before a spell. So even if we're not going to be doing an entire ritual surrounding the spell, let's say we're just going to do some kind of a quick spell, it can be very helpful to do some purifying and cleansing techniques in that area and on yourself, as we'll talk about too, that will also help create that space that where we're going to be doing the spell. And one of the things we're going to talk about too is like, well, this is kind of when would we do it, but we'll also be talking about why we would do it. And a lot of the times it's because we want to raise the vibration of that area and of ourselves before we do these magical workings. Another time we might want to create sacred spaces before divination. Of course, you can just pull cards or grab your pendulum or do some rune work without creating sacred space. You absolutely can do that, and I do it all the time. But, perhaps there's a time when we really want to sit down and we want to do a longer, lengthier divination, or maybe we're not in the right mind frame quite yet. Or maybe there's been a lot of chaos and chaotic energy in the area where we're going to be doing the divination. So, for that reason, before a divination, we might want to create some sacred space before we sit down to do it. And another time where we want to create some sacred space is during meditative journeying. So if you're going to be doing any shamanic journeying, if you're going to be doing some long guided meditations where you really want to get into a deep kind of alpha and maybe even theta state, then we might want to create that sacred space around us as well. So again, really what this is doing is it's raising the vibration of the area and also raising the vibration of us, which means that we will be more receptive to the universal energies around us. And then, of course, also another time that we might want to create sacred space is before healing work. So, if that healing work isn't part of a larger ritual or spell, maybe we're doing Reiki on someone, maybe we're sending white light or some kind of healing energy to someone. Maybe we're doing some healing work on a pet or a familiar. We might want to create some sacred space before we do that kind of work as well. So in these cases, in all of these cases we've talked about, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to cleanse and purify the space before the work that we're going to be doing. And then, like I mentioned as well, trying to raise our own vibration and the vibration of that space. And really what that means is when we raise the vibration around us and we raise the vibration within us, what we're doing is we are inviting more higher vibrational energies to be attracted to the area and be attracted to us. And we're also making it very difficult for lower vibrational energies to stick around. And that's really the idea behind smoke cleansing, which is one of the first techniques we're going to talk about. But what we'll be doing is we're going to be driving off some of this more negative energy or even entities that are in that space, entities that would make it more difficult for us to do the work that we want to do. So, suppose in the space where we are going to do our practice, there's been an argument, or there's been a fight, or there's been negative energy. Somebody's been upset about something. And if we go in and we do the ritual in that space without doing anything to change the vibration, essentially our ritual and our spell work can still work, but we're fighting against the fact that there's lower vibrational energies in that area. If we instead raise the vibration of the space before we do the working, we clear all of that out, and we're just going to make the working much easier for us. Now, another reason too that we might want to create sacred space is if we've ever felt threatened in an area and we're not really sure why. So I'm going to talk about some ideas about psychic cleansing a little bit later. But if you are just walking down a street and you're feeling kind of some threatening energy in that area, of course I would get out of that area. But there are some techniques you can do to raise your own vibration, which will make it a little bit more difficult for the negative energies to come around you. So I think that, like, when it comes to all magical practice, there's going to be a lot of techniques that I'm going to share tonight, and it's really important for you to consider the ones that you think resonate the most with you. You don't have to do any of the things I show. But if you find one or two that seem interesting, or maybe they're things you've done in the past and you've fallen off of doing them, this might be inspiration to get back involved with that. But anything that we can do, seeking out a method to raise our own vibration, can be a highly, highly important for us prior to any of the work we want to do. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about here is kind of the difference between indoor and outdoor space, which I briefly mentioned in the introduction. Many witches feel that indoor space should always be cleansed and purified before ritual. It really is up to you. A space like this or a space in your own home where you're constantly doing rituals. Maybe you have an altar set up in a corner of the room, and all you really do there is do your magical workings. Do you need to create sacred space every time you do something there? It's really up to you, but you may find that sometimes you don't need to. So some people will find it unnecessary to cleanse indoor space, though I would say the majority of witches probably will do some kind of purifying and cleansing technique before work indoors. Now, many feel it unnecessary, though, to cleanse and purify the space outdoors, because nature itself is already so purifying and so cleansing. Just think about, like, wind, for example. One purifying and cleansing technique is to go and stand in the wind and let it blow the negative energies that might be around you or attached to you. Let it blow them through you and then behind you. And so, for that reason, because wind and the movement of air is just something always naturally happening in the outdoors, we can make a case that nature itself is already sacred and doesn't need us to aid it in order to make it more sacred for our work, right? But we can also think about heightening our own vibration, in just heightening the vibration of that area in order to create a space that feels a little bit more sacred to us. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is repetition is a way that you will just naturally create more sacred space without doing anything. You don't even have to do anything, you just have to repeat magical workings in a spot, and you will naturally raise its vibration over time, and you will create a sacred space there over and over and over time. So also consider spaces where people have already done workings and rituals. So, for example, spaces like Sedona or Mount Shasta or Salem, Massachusetts, places where, or Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana, places where people go they take pilgrimages there and they do sacred rituals, you're going to find that those spots already are going to vibrate with that sacredness, and you may have less work to do when you get there before you do your own magical working. There is great power in repetition. I can't stress it enough. Sometimes people think that we need to like reinvent the wheel and we need to constantly think of new ways to do things. But when you find a good way to do a ritual, when you find a good way to create sacred space, there's no reason why you can't just stick with it, because repetition can be key in much of this work. All right, so that all being said, let us now dive into some techniques. So, this is the show and tell part of the episode. And again, I seem to have like some trouble with the chat. Okay, here I can see it. So, I see a few other people are here. I see Glitter is here and Carla. Hi, everybody. And Cindy is talking about candle gazing because I know it's one of her favorite things. Kurt said, what about old places from the Civil War and other deadly events? Would those areas be harder to cleanse? Yeah, absolutely. So places that have experienced great trauma are going to definitely need more work to cleanse. So I would just spend a little bit more time with it. You know, you can stack some of these techniques. So sometimes if it's really going to be an easy place to cleanse, maybe all we're going to do is a sage stick or a stick of incense or something like that. But if we're trying to cleanse a area where there's been trauma, there's been tragedy, there's even been death, for example, then I would probably stack the practices and I would do more than one thing in order to kind of help raise that energy. And if it is a space that, like, let's suppose you live in a place where tragedy has taken place, if you create sacred space over and over and over in that space, over time, you will gradually increase the vibration of that space, and and you'll have less work to do over time. But very, very good question. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is the one that everybody forgets because it's the most mundane of all, but it's just literally cleansing with good old-fashioned soap and water, dusting, vacuuming the space. Really, even before I do Ask Aislin, I sweep in this room, especially before I do rituals or yoga or anything like that. I sweep in this room, and part of it is to sweep away the physical dirt and the physical kind of grime that might be here. But the other idea behind it is I'm also energetically sweeping away some of the negative energy that's in the area. So this is often an overlooked technique, but to me, it should be the first one that we start with. Now, you can take a ritual bath before your rituals as well if you want to cleanse yourself. And you might want to think about getting some kind of magical soap. So those who are in our Shadow Seekers membership and also in our coven, we will often send prize boxes to people, or there are times when we're sending a box with some things. And Beth, the maiden of Coven of Midnight's Flame, she has started making magical soap. And so sometimes we'll include a few little small samples of that in the boxes. And I personally used it myself, and it's really great. There's one that she makes that's good for like drawing in money, and then there's another one she makes that's very good for purifying and cleansing. And so prior to rituals, I like to use that soap. I usually use hers, but you can also find cleansing or purifying soap in any magical apothecary or a botanica or some kind of metaphysical shop. But if you can't find that, or let's say you're somewhere where you don't have access to those kinds of things, you can get a good old-fashioned bar of soap, and you can charge it with your intention, and you just hold it in your hands and you send the intention into it. Then it's more than just going to be cleansing your physical body. You want it to also be cleansing your energetic body as well. So you fill that soap with that intention, and then as you take the shower or your bath, you're going to do this in more of an intentional way. So not only cleansing yourself physically, but also cleansing yourself energetically. And then before you even start your magical working or your ritual, you are starting from a higher vibrational space because you took that time. Now, other things that you can do in the space, like I mentioned, sweeping, vacuuming, clearing out the dust from the area, it has the physical, there's a physical purpose to that, but there's also an energetic purpose as well. So with the sweeping technique, for example, I think I'll get into that in just a second, a more magical use of sweeping, but just physical dusting, sweeping, and vacuuming can go a really long way. So don't overlook that, and don't forget about that very simple way that we can help raise the vibration of the area and cleanse sacred space. Um, all right. All right. I see Tabitha was saying Beth soaps are amazing. Yes, they are very, very amazing. And Jamie had mentioned, she said in places where violence like that took place, she said, yes, then again, it depends on what happened, why, and what kind of working you're doing. May be hard for healing, but great for baneful magic. And that's actually a really good point, too, because I think that one of the things that we want to make sure is that we're always using our intuition. So if you go to a place and it feels like the energy is very heavy and threatening, and you're trying to do some kind of like lighter magic, you, even when you cleanse it, even when you cleanse yourself, you may still feel that heaviness and that kind of threatening energy still hanging in the air. And if that continues to be the case, then you might want to move your lighter magic to another location. But as Jamie pointed out, places that hang with more heavy energy can be good for more baneful magic. So it really depends on the intention that you're doing. Okay, so next idea that we are going to talk about is salt in salt water. So there are two, we're going to talk about this sort of for the indoors and for the outdoors, and there's going to be two differing opinions depending on where we're going to be doing the work. So salt is very, very good at absorbing negative energy. It's one of the greatest cleansing and purifying items that we can find naturally in the world. It's also extremely grounding. This is not an episode about grounding, but if you ever feel ungrounded, just putting a few crystals of salt on your tongue is a really easy way to help you feel grounded, especially after a ritual where you've raised a ton of energy and you're feeling a little spacey. And put a couple of crystals of salt on the tongue and it will go a long way. Now, if we are in an indoor space, we can sprinkle salt around the edges of the room. We want to be careful with how much we do. If you have pets that you think would eat salt, I would be careful. I would only be sprinkling a little bit here as I was going around the room. And there's two ways that we can purify the room. We can either do it with salt. We can either do it diasil, which is clockwise, or we can do it widdershins, which is counterclockwise. And it really has to do with your intention. So if we're trying to drive out some negative energy, then we might want to throw the salt around us in a counterclockwise direction. And what we're doing here is we're pushing energy out, we're moving energy, we're banishing bad energy from the area. If instead more of the intention is trying to raise the vibration, not necessarily get rid of stuff, but raise the vibration, have more lightness in the area, then we might want to go around the space clockwise, and then we can toss the salt. And I just do a little pinch as you go around the room. And then you just go all around the room. You can do it once, you can do it 3 times. It all depends on your practice and which number you feel works better for you. Now, a word about using salt outdoors is that you have to be very mindful about how you're using it and how much you are using. Literally, right before I came on to do this live, it's like sometimes synchronicity, something came up in my feed from a group that I personally think the spirit of the group is a little more negative than Body Mind Witchcraft is. In Body Mind Witchcraft, we try to be a learning group where we're not going to chastise people for doing things that we wouldn't do. But in this particular group, they're always chastising each other. And someone was talking about salt, and people are going after them about using salt outdoors. I think that we need to be more mindful about salt. Salt outdoors can kill grass, it can kill plants, and so you want to be very careful about it. In my opinion, I would not be using salt outdoors because I want to be more mindful about the ground. Of course, if I'm on asphalt, or my driveway, which is where some of our rituals take place, is on concrete, there's going to be no problem with cleansing the area with salt. But if we're in a grassy area, if we're in the forest, and we're in places where the salt could hurt plants, then we of course don't want to use it. But if we hear people saying that they're using it, we can just gently suggest other methods rather than chastising them. And I know I'm speaking to the choir because I know everybody in Body Mind Witchcraft comes from more of a spirit of love and teaching and learning, right? But so, what are some other things we could do if we wanted to use this type of cleansing outdoors, and we wanted to do a salt circle, but we are worried about being on the grass? So, one technique that's really interesting is that you can get a hula hoop. If your space you want to make is really small, I mean hula hoops are pretty small, but the space you want to get is pretty small, you can get a hula hoop. You can, if it detaches in any place, you open it up and you can fill it with salt and then close it back up. And now you actually have a salt ring that you can put around yourself while you're standing there or sitting there. And that is kind of neat because it's something that you can use outdoors in the grass without having the salt touch the grass. Other things that you can do are substitute salt with other cleansing and purifying ingredients, like crushed eggshells is a very good one. It's going to have a very similar effect. Ashes. So you can, if you burn, let's say you're burning incense, in Shadow Seekers and the Coven, we do a lot of like burning intentions or burning the paper. So if you save that ash from burning whatever you've done, you can crush it up and save it, and then that can be sprinkled in a circle outdoors to create sacred space. Other thing like protective herbs like lavender, which is not going to hurt the grass if you toss it in the grass. You could create a circle around your space with lavender instead of salt if you're doing it outdoors. So just some thoughts of how you can kind of do this similar technique but not have to use the salt and then worry about it being damaging to the plants and the grass outdoors. So the next thing we're going to talk about is smoke cleansing, and here is where we're going to start doing some demonstrations. So let me see. I'm looking at the chat though before I go on. Okay, Sabrina said, do you think the kind of salt matters? This is a good question. Like white, pink, dead salt, or black salt, dead sea salt, or black salt, or even using a salt spray to help if concerned about destroying something. Yeah, I think that a salt spray could be a really good option because the dilution of the salt, it's a very minimal amount of salt that's actually going to be in every spray that you do from the spray bottle. So that would be a great option if you're kind of worried about it, or if you're worried about having the salt even in your indoor space. A salt spray would be awesome, and that's so easy, right? Because you just get a spray bottle, put water in it, and then put some salt in it. Now, Sabrina also asked a good question about the type of salt: white salt, pink salt, sea salt, dead sea salt, or black salt. I think it really has to do with your intention. I personally have all of those here, and we use them for different reasons. I love the black salt for like banishing, especially. I love it for witches' bottles. I love the like pink salt, or like Himalayan salt is very, it has minerals in it that are different than in just plain old table salt. So it can be really good. And the pink color connects it to the heart chakra. So it can be used if you're trying to do a ritual where you're sort of lifting up your vibration and opening your heart. But I think it all depends on your intention. But like I said, I personally have all of them here so that I have them on hand when I want to grab them for some specific use. But very good question. Um, okay. Jamie said she likes the hula hoop idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. Unfortunately, it's not that big, so it really only goes around you. But you know, if you're sitting outdoors and it's something you just put around you, and now you've got a salt ring around you. Okay, so let's go on to smoke cleansing next. Now, sage sticks are typically what are used most often in smoke cleansing, but you can use other herbs, and I'm going to show, I've got a bunch of different kinds that I've found, and there's a particular shop over here I love going to because I can get different kinds of smudge, of sage sticks. So I think the important thing before we start discussing sage is always like to start with being educated about sage. It's important to understand why the ethical ramifications of using sage. So picking white sage in the United States is illegal. So you can't just go out somewhere and pick it. If you grow it on your own property, of course, it's yours. You tended to it, you cared for it. Personally, if you can grow it yourself, even better, because now your energy of love and care is in this herb before you even use it. But if you are not able to grow it yourself, then you want to find forms of sage or other forms of sage you can use, or you want to find a source where the sage is ethically sourced. So the person I get it from is Native American. He certifies that this is all ethically sourced, and I trust him very much. Sadly, he does not sell online. He's got a website where he shows everything he has, but he does not sell anything online. But I was over at his shop the other day, and I picked up, I've never even seen Florida water sage. So this has white sage, lavender, lemon, and Palo Santo in it. And I don't even know if people are going to be able to see it on the camera, but it's like, it's pretty cool because you can see it's got like a lemon here attached to the sage. There's a piece of Palo Santo attached to it. There's some lavender attached to it. So you don't have to just get regular old sage. Another type he sold was the Seven Powers sage. This one has white sage, rosemary, mint, basil, ruta, lavender, and pepper. So there's different kinds you can get. I also have black sage. This is actually mugwort. I love mugwort. I just sent it to our newest initiates in our coven. Mugwort's very good for not only kind of cleansing, smoke cleansing, but it is also very good for getting you into a more of a receptive space for things like astral travel, lucid dreaming. I like it for psychic work. If we're going to do scrying, things like that, I love. Instead of using white sage, I love using mugwort and then burning that around me, kind of cleansing my own body with it and then cleansing the space around me. So any of the forms of sage that you find, as long as they're ethically sourced, are great. And then what you're going to do with them is use them in kind of a similar way that we did with the salt. Typically, you can cleanse yourself. So let's do this. So I'm going to use this mugwort, and I just realized that I didn't have a lighter here. So I'm sure everybody's used this, but in case people have not, we want to light one end of it. And then if I'm using this to cleanse myself, then I am going to get it burning a little bit here. Here we go. And then I'm just going to kind of bring it around my body, swirl it around my body, and this is going to help cleanse my own aura by bringing the smoke into my own auric space. Now, if instead I want to cleanse the space around me, similar to using the salt, we can take this sage stick, this in this case mugwort, and we can move around the circle or the room in a diacetyl or clockwise direction. I'm having trouble getting it lit tonight. And that will help us raise the vibration of the space. So it's all kind of about your intention. If you really feel like you want to banish negative energies from the area, then you might want to go in the Widdershins or counterclockwise direction. And you just go around. And again, you can go around one time around the room. I personally like doing things in sets of 3. So I will go around the room 3 times and use that. Now, another technique that I learned that I think is kind of interesting is using sage or like lavender or some of the other herbs that are kind of common would be rosemary, lavender, or cedar. Cedar is also very purifying and cleansing, so if you don't want to use sage for some reason, you could get cedar instead. And so one of the things you can do is you can take the bundle, the sage bundle or cedar or whatever herb we're using, go around the space counterclockwise a few times, and then use Palo Santo and go around it clockwise. And so a lot of times the the sage can be used to sort of banish negative energies, and the Palo Santo can be used to draw in more positive ones. So we're doing kind of double duty here. We're banishing the things we don't want to be in this space and area, and then we're drawing in the ones that we do. So those are some ideas. Now, some alternatives to using an herbal bundle like this would be to use resins. And so that's what I wanted to show next. I mean, there is just plain old incense sticks which you can use. My favorite brand is Satya. Here's the dragon's blood and the patchouli. I have so many different types of Satya incense. I personally like Satya because it is more natural, in my opinion, and pure. I've done some research on different kinds, and there are different brands that are less, I think they're less safe to be burning, especially indoors. Satya, I always feel, it's made of more pure resins, and I feel safer with it. The one thing that I recommend people not do is get things that are infused with a lot of artificial fragrances. I could have a whole episode on artificial fragrances, but they are one of the more damaging things that a person can do for their own body, their physical body, because many contain phthalates, and they are known to be hormone disruptors. And hormone disruptors matter for everybody, because your hormones are not just your sex hormones. Like we sometimes think it's all your hormones. Like your entire body is run by hormones. And so if we're dysregulating our hormones through like dousing ourselves in our space with like artificial fragrances and chemicals, and we're disrupting our hormones, then it's going to be harder to have good health. So I try to always find things that are natural and pure, and you're gonna find that that's much better for you. You'll probably feel better if you do that. So I like Satya for that reason, but there are a few other brands. Just kind of, if you're in the market for incense, just do a little research on it. Find the ones that seem to be more natural, and those are the ones to use. They tend to be a little bit more expensive though. Now, what I want to show here, though, is we're going to show some resin, and this is some Lakshmi resin. So I'm not entirely sure what this is made of, but I know that it is natural. And I am going to burn it in charcoal. And so I have this little cauldron that Beth got me for my birthday a couple years ago. So this is a perfect thing to burn resin in. I'm going to be burning it on a piece of charcoal. For those who've never used charcoal before, I highly recommend this. I can get this literally in my CVS because there are a lot of Catholics here who practice magic, and they may not call it what we call it, but our CVS sells this. It sells Florida water. It sells all kinds of prayer candles. If you if you don't find it at CVS, which most of you won't, you can find it in metaphysical shops, botanicas. You can always order this online as well. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to put it in a little incense burner like this, and I'm going to put some salt in the bottom of it, because this particular burner that I'm going to use, and for that matter, a little cauldron like this, is going to get really hot once the charcoal starts to heat up. Now, if you put some salt in the bottom, it's going to serve as insulation. I'm sorry, you could actually use salt. This is actually sand. But if we put a little sand in the bottom, then it will provide insulation, and it will be easier to pick this up and move it later when I want to. Otherwise, it's going to remain really hot. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to do, so I pour the sand in there, and then we are going to heat up the charcoal. And normally I just do this with my fingers, but because Beth gave me a set of tongs, we're going to use these here. And this just means that I won't have to worry about burning my fingers, because sometimes as you're lighting the charcoal, it will get really hot, and you don't even realize until it's too hot, and then you drop it, and I don't want to do that today. So we are going to light this. Here we go. Now, a word about the charcoal is, because I live in the southwestern United States, my charcoal, it's really dry. And so it's going to burn so well. So this is already beginning. You can see it smoking, and then you're going to start to see it turn red eventually, and it'll spark a little bit. Not sure if we can see that on the camera yet. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. See how it's already starting to spark. Okay. So if you do not live in a place, if you live in a place that's quite humid, what you're going to want to do is when you buy this charcoal, make sure that you wrap it up really tight in some aluminum foil, and this is going to protect it. Ooh, it's already getting really hot. So we're going to put that down. Okay, so I placed it on top of here. And then the next step is we're going to place some of the resin on top of that. Now, this form of burning incense is, there we go. That is a big piece of resin. So we're going to wait for this to start to heat up. You can already see the charcoal getting red. And now you can see here comes the smoke from the resin. And then what I'm going to do, it's already getting hot. Even though I put the sand in the bottom, it's already really hot. I'm going to cover it, and we have this really dramatic effect. And then I'm going to have to put it down because it's already really hot. Ooh, okay. So I was hoping to hold that a little bit longer for you. But here you can see, we can see the smoke there already starting. So like I mentioned, if you live in a humid area, you're going to want to seal that up really good. Otherwise, you're going to use one piece of this, as well always happened to me in Boston. I would use like one piece of this, and then I would come back maybe a couple weeks later, and the whole thing shot. It won't even heat light anymore. Okay, so that is now way too hot for me to pick up, so I'm going to leave that there, but hopefully that gave you a good demonstration of how to use the charcoal. And you can do the same thing in a cauldron. You can also get a soapstone dish, and if you're going to do it that way, again, I would put some salt in or sand in the bottom, put the charcoal on top, and then put your resin on top, and you're good to go. Now, unlike a stick of incense, which will, burn it's through a duration of time, when you're using resin, it's going to burn much more quickly. It's very dramatic, as you can see. It's much more dramatic than if we're using stick incense, but it's going to burn out pretty quickly, and the charcoal will still be really hot. So you can continue to replace the resin on top of it as long as you want to continue burning it and create the effect. All right, so that is smoke cleansing. We're using different various techniques like herbal sticks and resin. Okay. Okay, and Jamie thank you, Jamie. Yeah, she put Satya, and she got the spelling right. She must know that brand. Yeah, Satya. Awesome. Okay, and then Chelsea also shared Sea Witch Botanicals is her new favorite incense, and she said they're also very good. Yeah, I always love getting recommendations from people because, there's some incense that's not so great to use because it does have fragrance oils in it. All right. Okay, awesome. And I see Glitter said using cornmeal is a good substitute for salt. That's another great substitute for using salt outdoors. Okay, awesome. All right, I'm going to keep it moving here. All right, so next up is ritual sweeping. So we already talked about sweeping earlier, which is more like physically sweeping the room. Ritual sweeping is where we have more of an intention. Again, we're trying to sweep away any negative energies that might be in the space. So we're going to use it sort of the same way that we would use smoke cleansing or salt cleansing. We can sweep widdershins counterclockwise to drive off negative energies. We can sweep diasyl or clockwise in order to bring in more positive energies. And like I mentioned earlier too, is you can stack these practices. So you can start by cleansing with salt, and then you can do some smoke cleansing, and then you can do your sweeping, or you can start with your sweeping, and then you can do some salt cleansing. So because if you sweep after the salt, you might sweep away the salt. So start with the salt, then do the sweeping, and then do the smoke cleansing. And here we're stacking on these practices, these cleansing techniques, and we're going to have an even better effect when we're trying to create our sacred space. All right. And as far as ritual sweeping goes, you can use a regular broom. I would probably recommend that if you are going to be doing ritual sweeping for like a specific purpose of, um, creating sacred space, I would probably get a broom that I used only for that. And, around this time of year, you can even find some of the decorative brooms because a lot of times, too, is like when we're cleansing, let's say we want to create some sacred space through some sweeping. And maybe we've already come through the room with our regular broom and we did kind of the physical clearing out of the dirt and the dust from the area. We can then come in with a ritual broom, and you may not even necessarily be sweeping on the floor. It's more of an energetic movement anyway. So if you get a decorative broom like are often sold around this time of year, some of them have like they're infused with cinnamon or different herbs, or I have a really beautiful broom that's made out of like fabric and cloth that can also absolutely be used for this purpose for ritual sweeping, because I don't necessarily have to put it on the ground. I'm not really, especially if I've already cleansed the room physically, and I'm really more like sweeping the air as I'm going. And that would then lead us to asperging. So, asperging is another technique, very similar. It has a similar purpose to all of these. In asperging, instead of using smoke or using water or using salt, we're going to be using water. Now, you can sprinkle or fling the water into the corners of the room or around the circle as you go. Again, you can go counterclockwise if your intention is more to drive negative energy out, or you can go clockwise if your intention is more to bring in more positive energy. Now, when it comes to the water, you can use regular water. Tap water is sacred. Water is sacred, just like nature is sacred. We don't have to do anything to water to make it sacred. So we can use tap water. We can use water, bottled water. We can use water if you've got a Brita filter, filtered water. You can use that. Or you can use holy water. And I wanted to just talk for a moment about what holy water really is. To a Catholic, holy water is going to probably have a different definition than it would to a witch. To a Catholic, holy water has been blessed by a priest, but to a witch, holy water has been blessed with an intention. So it doesn't, you yourself can make holy water. Now, I happen to get a bottle. This is a bottle of holy water that's almost gone now. I got this from the Eye of the Cat, which is a metaphysical shop in Long Beach, California. Um, it has been infused with some kind of herbal blend because I can smell it. It doesn't smell exactly like water. So you can, if you want to make holy water, you can infuse it with herbal blend. You can infuse it with essential oils. But the real idea here is that you want to infuse it with your intention. So I'm sure that the witch who made this at Cat and Eye of the Cat infused it with an intention of purification before they sold it. So we can also do that. Now you can use the moon water that you make. If you set your water out to make full moon water, you can use that as making part of your holy water. Put a portion of it aside, bless it with the intention of clearing and purifying your space to kind of raise the vibration or create sacred space, and you've already got holy water. Now, you can also, if you don't feel that you can make it, which I promise you, you can, every one of you, whether you believe it or not, you can absolutely charge water with your intention to make holy water. But, if you're worried about it, you can also find a high priest or priestess and have them make it for you or get some at a metaphysical shop. Now, there's also spray bottles. Like, here's another one from the Eye of the Cat. This is just a purification spray. This one doesn't seem to have, it's got some kind of herbal blend in it. But this is kind of nice because it can be sprayed instead of like this holy water we would use for the asperging. So let's just talk for a moment about the asperging. Oftentimes, the asperging can be done just with your fingers. You can dip it in the water and fling it. But what most people do is they take a stick, or like even a feather could be used for this, and you want to dip the stick into the water and then you fling it out to the corners. And a lot of people will use like like a very young branch off of a tree, because it's not like, it's got some give to it. It's got some flexibility to it. We want it to be able to kind of be flexible as we fling the water. So that's why a nice new branch off of a tree can be really good. So that is the spurging you would do. Another thing I found, like you can find, going back to the idea of sage and Palo Santo and things like this, here's a Palo Santo spray I literally just got at a place a couple of days ago. And this one also has some stones in it. And so again, this can be sprayed around the corners of the room or around the entirety of the circle. All right, so that is pretty much, those are all of the kind of the energetic techniques for creating some space around you. But let's also talk about psychic cleansing too, because let's say that we purify everything around us. Ooh, I just went to move the, that was stupid. I just went to move or push the little thurible away that I have the incense in, and I burned my finger. But it's a good thing I didn't touch it very hard or for very long. Okay, so let's suppose we've cleansed the whole space and we're feeling really good about that, but let's not forget about ourselves. Because the reality is that we as modern witches, we live in between the magical and the mundane worlds, and we have these mundane lives that get bogged down by the energy of the mundane. And so sometimes we need to psychically cleanse ourselves. Now, psychic cleansing is always good, but especially good if we have had a bad day at work. We've had a bad day with our family. We've been fighting with someone. We're just feeling down or negative because of what's going on in the world. And so we might want to use this practice of psychic cleansing in addition to cleansing our space. Now, usually, in order to do psychic cleansing, you want to start by going into a light meditative space, or state rather, and visualize or sense or feel the space and the energy around you being cleared. You know, I mean, one of the things that and actually I should take that back, because we can actually do psychic cleansing for the space and we can also do it for ourselves as well. So let's suppose you can't burn incense and you can't do sage. Let's say you can't burn anything. You don't really have the means to be able to do anything with salt, but you can still cleanse your space psychically. You absolutely can do it, because at the end of the day, all of these things, they're meant to, like we said, raise the vibration of the area, help us kind of entrain with the vibrations around us, but they are just extensions of the same kind of energy that we have in our minds. So the power of our intention is something that should never be disregarded. It should never be overlooked. So you literally can get into a light meditative state, and you can see yourself doing these things. You can see yourself lighting the incense, even if you don't light incense. You can see yourself using a sage stick and going around the room and cleansing it. You can see yourself doing any of this, but you can also see yourself just encircling the space with a ring of white light or white crystal or something like that, or a rose colored light. Sometimes people really find that energy of the heart chakra very cleansing. And so I know from talking to some of you, you live in very small spaces. Having some of this stuff isn't always easier. Finding this stuff, we have people who live in rural areas where the next place over, the next town over is 30 minutes away, and they don't have any stores where they're going to be selling metaphysical supplies. You can probably get some salt, but maybe you can't get the other things. But you can always use your mind and do psychic cleansing of your space that way. Now, in addition to that, you can consider cleansing yourself as well. Like I said, especially if you've been around some negative energies prior to that day. So I think that one of the easiest ways to probably do some psychic cleansing of yourself is to do auric cleansing. So you would close your eyes, get into a light meditative state, and try to sense your aura. So even if you don't, not everybody visualizes it, just so you know, most people don't. So when you close your eyes, it can oftentimes, for many people, it can just be a sensation. We all have this sort of energetic field that is at least several inches away from us. We can push it out bigger, and we can also draw it in and make it smaller, but we're all surrounded by it. And so when you close your eyes, you go into this light meditative space, you can scan your aura and just use that, like, use your thought, use your like many of us are claircognizant, and we don't give ourselves any credit for that. If you feel that there's a part of your aura that's torn or is damaged, or maybe a part that's kind of weaker than others, you can see yourself cleansing that in your mind. And you can think of cleansing with a sponge. So you could even, like, even if you can't sense there's a part of your aura that is damaged or that is torn or anything like that, or weak, you could still cleanse your entire aura. You just close your eyes and just imagine yourself, see yourself sort of like brushing or using a sponge and just brushing the space around you and cleansing your auric field that way. So I think that it can be really effective to do this all the time, like every day, to do auric cleansing. If you try that for a month or so, it's a quick practice. It really only takes a couple of minutes to close your eyes and do it. You do that for a month, and I bet you're going to feel a lot different. Like your energy is going to feel a lot different. You're going to feel like you're at a higher vibrational state. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you can stack these practices. You can start with ritual bathing, then you can do some smoke cleansing, then you can do some meditation. Maybe then, while you're meditating, you do some auric cleansing on yourself. And that can be a highly effective way to create sacred space in around you and also within you. So let's just end here, though, before we go to the Q&A. Let's end very quickly with what if we only have a very limited amount of space? So if you don't have much space, then you actually have less to worry about. There's less space to cleanse. So that can be a positive thing because there's less work for you. You could try the hula hoop idea. You could get the hula hoop, fill it with salt, and sit with that around you, and you've already created sacred space in your very small space. But another thing that I always like to share when I do a video on sacred space is a gift that a dear friend of mine, Anne, gave me when I first initiated into my first coven. And this is just the most thoughtful gift ever that I love so much. And if you if you want an idea for a witchy friend for Yule or another Sabbath, here's a great idea. So she got little things that would fit inside this little kit, and it's basically like a mini altar that a person can set up. So here we have this tiny little chalice, right? So that we can maybe do our cakes and ale. She included, let's see, there's two little bowls here. So we have these two tiny little wooden bowls. And these bowls have, there's a container of water and a container of salt. So here, all of a sudden, we've got everything we need to purify and cleanse our space, but we can also pour the salt and the water into the little bowls to have it be a little more ceremonious, or if we just want to have the salt and the water represented on our little altar that we're setting up. She included a little candle holder like this. It is perfect for a chime candle. And she also included a set of chime candles. There's about 3 in here. Let's see what else we have. The smallest little sage bundle here, which is great. She's got some more candles. There's a little crystal. So who doesn't need a little quartz crystal? Also very good. Like all this stuff could be used to purify and create our sacred space. And then she also included a book of incense matches. So not only are they just matches that we can use to light the candles, but we also have our incense right here as well. So to me, it's just so beyond thoughtful and creative and awesome, and what a great gift for a witch, right? So think about putting together something like this, and this is literally like a traveling altar. And you know, if you want to, or a little altar for someone who lives in a really small space. Because everything just gets put away like this. It's also really good for a witch who is in the broom closet and lives with other people, and you're trying to hide your practice from them. Boom, there is your altar already ready, and then you just put it somewhere and nobody even knows, and it's easy to put it away. So I love sharing that because it's just such an awesome, awesome little gift. Okay, let me see. Anything else I wanted to share? Okay, so let us move now. I hope that gave you some ideas, some food for thought. Of course, put any questions in the chat, and let me see. We're going to move into the Q&A now. I have one question that came up on a post, and I wanted to talk about it here because I want to demonstrate something that I couldn't really speak it through typing. So I'm going to answer a question here. But let's open this up for questions from anybody, and they can be questions about anything related to witchcraft, shadow work, energy work. Um, uh, Oh, and Jenny had said, you may have already talked about it, but she said, I like to use spiritual water sprays when I can't use incense. Yeah, and I was showing there's this Palo Santo one. We can get sage ones. I love that too. Especially it's good for people who can't burn incense, either because they can't be around it or they live with people who can't be around it, or for those witches who are trying to be secretive and live with people. The sprays can be particularly good because we don't have all the smoke. I love that as an idea too. Glitter said, could a specifically infused athame or sword be used? Absolutely. You know, we oftentimes think about our athame or our sword as being used for casting the circle, but it also can absolutely be used for creating sacred space as well. Definitely. Um, Okay. Any questions here? We'd also love to hear the practices you're using. I see people are putting them in the chat, and I think that's really great, especially for those who are going to watch this video here in the Body Mind Witchcraft um, Facebook group. I love when people share their own ideas because other people come along and they watch it later, and then they get to see all those other ideas too. Okay, so let's go to this Q&A next. So I'm just going to read this one question, and then I'll share with you some things that are coming up. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up. We have a free workshop tomorrow I'll tell you all about as well. But this first question is from Debbie, and she was talking about working with her sacral chakra. And I feel like other people can relate to this. So I wanted, even though this came from a post, I wanted to highlight it here. So she said, on the subject of the second chakra, sacral chakra, she said, do you experience not wanting to start anything new because you may waste time, money, or supplies? She said, I've tried grounding myself, but I get too anxious. Meanwhile, my joy is ebbing away. Is there some kind of witchy thing that I can do so that my joy doesn't just blow out of my life like some metaphoric candle? Or she said metamorphic candle. So this is a great question. There's a lot in this question that I just wanted to address. So I am going to show the breath of joy at the end of this question. And those who've been coming to my Kundalini classes in Shadow Seekers membership, I've taught the breath of joy there, but I'm going to share it with you guys tonight. But I did want to mention a few things. So one of the things, because Debbie mentioned waste, and if anybody of you relate to this, like I'm afraid of wasting time, I'm afraid of wasting money, I'm afraid of wasting something. Waste is, and fears about waste are issues of the root chakra. So when Debbie also had mentioned trying to ground herself but still feeling anxious. So whatever technique, like if we're grounding ourselves and we're still feeling anxious, there's a part of us that's not getting grounded. So whatever technique we're trying, we might want to mix it up and try a different grounding technique and see if it works. But the also this idea of like being afraid of waste would tell me that a person's root chakra is probably not fully balanced, because the idea of waste comes from the root. So you'd probably want to think about working through those issues. Where does the idea of waste come from? Was there a family member who talked about waste? My grandmother, she had my mom like really old for that time period. She had her in her 40s, and so my grandma lived through the Great Depression, and she was always talking about um, wasting things. And so I grew up with this like fear of wasting stuff as well, which is can be a good thing because it means that like I'm very careful about like not trying to waste anything, trying to use up all of the food that we can, not throwing things away. But it also will compromise our root chakra at times when we're afraid of like wasting money, wasting time, things like that. So we want to explore those issues. Who does that go back to? Whose stuff are you carrying that isn't quite your own? And I would explore the issues surrounding waste. Um, but because what it does is when we're so focused down in the root chakra without even knowing it, it's not allowing the energy to flow upward into the sacral chakra, which is where your joy is in the first place. So that could start to explain why a person who's afraid of waste is having trouble feeling like joy, feeling joyful about their lives. So the real question here then is you do some root chakra work, but then the next question is, well, what really does give you pleasure? And explore how to engage in those activities more often. So hopefully as you start to do the root chakra work around waste and you clear some of that out, this will make this part easier. But what is it that you like to do? And if you have trouble doing good things for yourself or doing joyful things for yourself, ask yourself, can you do them for other people? And if the answer is yes, then you've got some work to explore about yourself. So what is it about you that isn't deserving of joy when other people are? Now, another way to kind of approach this is through the inner child, because sometimes it can be easier for people to do good things for their inner child than it is to do good things for them grown up. And so the inner child date, taking yourself on an inner child date or taking your inner child on a date and buying them something at the art store or buying them something at the toy store or buying them ice cream or buying them something that's very pleasurable can help. And you can frame it as I'm treating my inner child to this. So if it's hard to treat yourself, you can try to get around it and past it by treating your inner child. And then over time, because this is working on the solar plexus and the sacral chakra, you will start to lift some of the inability to give yourself joy. Now, um, also, I think that you want to work through issues of guilt. That's all in the root and the sacral chakra and the solar plexus. So the bottom three chakras you'll want to be working with. But the other thing I wanted to show is the breath of joy. So it's really you can do it standing or seated. So we're going to show it seated, and it's really really hard to do this and not feel happy. So if you're feeling really like down in the dumps, try this breath for like a minute and just see if it helps. So it's like a 3-part inhale and a 1-part exhale. And on the inhale, you're going to inhale a third of the way as you bring your arms up in front of you, parallel to the floor. And then another third of the way as you spread the arms out to the side, and that's really good for opening the heart. And then you inhale the final third of the way as you bring your arms above you. And then as you exhale, you'll just bring your arms behind you. And I like to think of just like pushing the negative away, all the things that are like not allowing us to feel joyful. So we go inhale, 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 exhale, inhale, 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 exhale. And then I usually tell people, put a smile on your face, even if you don't feel it. Because it's not really just about fake it till you make it or fake it till you feel it. It's about like, let's be joyful at least for this moment because we were taught this really nice breath that may help us feel better. And so even if we're not feeling joyful about our life, at least we can feel joyful about this moment. So I like to breathe in through the nose and then out through the mouth. And you do that for about a minute or 2 minutes, and already you'll start to feel the energy. It's moving in the heart space, it's moving in the arms. It's kind of hard not to stay totally down in the dumps. It's going to lift you at least a little bit up when you try the breath. So I hope that helps. And that kind of segues me into what's coming next, what's coming up. We do things like that in our Shadow Seekers membership. And for those who are wanting to take their spiritual practice to the next level, work through their blockages, the things that are holding them back, and really be able to step into their power as witches and as magical practitioners, our Shadow Seekers membership may be right for you. So we are kicking everything off tomorrow with a live free workshop on Zoom at this time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And this is my workshop, Intro to Shadow Work for Witches, Empaths, and Spiritually Minded People. Now I teach this as one of 3 free workshops I teach and a free ritual. And I do them each one time a year. So if you took this workshop last year, I teach it a little differently every year. We'd love to have you come. It's always fun to brush up on the stuff that you learned, and it kind of reminds you of the things you've forgotten. But if you've never taken this workshop, and especially if you're interested in shadow work and energy work and how it can help you kind of take your practice to the next level, then we really hope you will come and join us. You can join us live, like I said, on Zoom. And for those who are here with us right now, let me see if I can put this in the chat. And anybody who's going to watch this back and replay later, you guys can you can check this out. Here's this link. Okay, here, hopefully I can put this in here. Okay, good. All right, so this is that page will take you to information on the workshop for tomorrow. There's the Zoom link and more information about the workshop, what the workshop's about. Like I said, it's 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. It's about an hour to an hour and a half. There will be a Q&A at the end as well, so people will have the chance to ask me questions in the chat, or they can even unmute themselves and ask me the questions while we're live there on Zoom. And like I said, there will be a replay immediately afterwards for anybody who misses it. Now, right after that workshop, we're going to open up our Shadow Seekers membership on the 29th, Friday. For Black Friday, we have a very special deal this year, even better than it was last Black Friday. And we'll be opening our membership up from Friday, 11/29 to Thursday, 12/4. So there's a whole week to decide if you want to join it. But because of how good the offer is, I anticipate more people signing up for this, and we may run out of spots. So what I would recommend is, if you really know you want to get in earlier. And in fact, after the workshop tomorrow, I'm going to open up the doors for those who are at the workshop and those who watch it within the next 48 hours. I'm going to open it up. You guys can get in first and get in early and reserve your spot to make sure that you don't miss out this round. So you'll learn more about the membership during the workshop as well. At the end, we'll talk about what goes on in the workshop, but at least the workshop itself will give people a chance to understand what shadow work is. I'm going to teach you some techniques that you can literally use right away. So whether you're interested in the membership or not, you're going to learn a ton about shadow work at this workshop. All right, so that is coming up. If anybody has any trouble finding the link for the Zoom to join us live, or eventually finding the link for the replay, reach out to me and I will get it to you. If you're not already on our mailing list, then I would recommend signing up for our mailing list. I'm going to put that link in the chat as well. If you're watching on YouTube later, this will be in the description of the video. So that is a link where you can join our mailing list, and that way you get all of the information delivered right to you, plus you get a free copy of The Witch's Guide to Shadow Work. Then let's see what's coming up after that. So next Wednesday or Tuesday, I'll be back with Ask Aislin. This is going to be my top shadow work tips. So I've done about 3 or 4 episodes where I've shared tips on shadow work. I'm going to put my favorite 10 together and do an episode just on that next week. On 12/10, we're going to have an episode on the laws of magic. On 12/17, it will be our Yule and winter solstice ritual. And then on 12/24, It's Christmas Eve. I'm not Christian, so I'm still doing Ask Aislin. For those who want to join me, we're going to be talking about holiday self-care and some ideas for people who are going to struggle during the holidays, have to deal with non-pagan family members that are difficult, things like that. So we'll talk about all of that on 12/24. All right. So I am going to sign off here in case that in case I've missed something, because there's a lot of comments in the chat. If I missed anything, I'm going to go back in afterwards and I will answer anything I've missed. But as always, it's so great to be with you guys. I love spending Tuesdays with everyone live. Make sure to leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in the video so we get it out to the feed of more people. Ask questions and comments. You can put comments and questions in the chat. Even if you're watching in replay, again, like I said, I go back and I answer them all later. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Body, Mind, Witchcraft. And that way you will not miss any future episodes. All right, I will hopefully see a lot of you tomorrow at our live Zoom workshop, Introduction to Shadow Work. Until next time, blessed be.